It was a cold evening in the middle of fall when Alex, an animal rescue volunteer, decided to take a walk in his neighborhood. He often went on these walks to clear his mind after long days of helping animals in need. The sun had just set, and the streetlights were starting to flicker on, casting an orange glow across the quiet street. The neighborhood was peaceful, with only the rustling of leaves and the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. But then something unusual happened. As Alex walked past an old, abandoned house at the end of the street, he heard a faint sound. It was a soft whimper, almost like a puppy crying. Alex paused, listening closely. It was so quiet, he could almost convince himself it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. But then he heard it again, this time a little louder, a little more desperate. His heart skipped a beat. There were no pets living in this area. The house in front of him had been abandoned for years, its windows broken and its front yard overgrown with weeds. He had walked past it countless times, never once thinking that anything could be inside. But tonight was different. That whimper was too real to ignore. Alex's curiosity and concern for animals got the best of him. He knew he had to find out where the sound was coming from. Looking around, he saw that no one else was nearby. The street was empty, and the neighborhood felt like it was holding its breath. With a deep breath, Alex stepped closer to the house. The closer he got, the clearer the whimpers became. It was coming from the back of the house, near a broken fence that had long since fallen into disrepair. Alex quickly made his way around to the back, keeping his steps light to avoid making too much noise. When he reached the fence, he stopped, feeling a lump form in his throat. There, tied to a rusty chain attached to a nearby post, was a small puppy. The poor thing was shaking, its ribs showing through its fur, and its eyes were wide with fear. The puppy had clearly been there for some time. It was alone. It was hungry, and it was desperate for help. Alex's heart ached as he looked at the small German Shepherd puppy. It was barely more than a few months old, its fur matted and dirty. Its eyes were full of fear, but there was something else there too. Hope. The kind of hope that comes from an animal knowing someone will come to save them, but not knowing when that will happen. Alex couldn't believe what he was seeing. How could anyone leave such a beautiful, innocent puppy in a place like this? Who would do this to a helpless animal? The more Alex thought about it, the angrier he got. But there was no time to waste on anger. The puppy needed him, and Alex knew he had to act fast. The chain that held the puppy was rusted and old. The poor thing had probably been tethered there for days, maybe weeks. Alex gently approached the puppy, speaking softly to calm it down. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here to help," he whispered, kneeling down to untangle the chain. The puppy flinched at first, scared of the stranger who was coming toward it. But then, as Alex reached out, the puppy's trembling stopped for a moment, and it looked up at him with those wide, pleading eyes. It was as if the puppy knew Alex was the one who would set it free. With a quick pull, the chain came loose, and Alex scooped the puppy into his arms. The little dog was light, but its body felt weak, like it hadn't eaten in days. Alex could feel the puppy's body trembling, not just from fear, but from exhaustion and hunger. As Alex held the puppy close, he couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. He was relieved to have found the dog, but at the same time, he felt a deep sadness for what the puppy had endured. No dog should ever be left alone, chained up and forgotten, especially not a young puppy. This was only the beginning of a journey, one that would change both of their lives forever. But for now, Alex whispered softly to the puppy, "You're safe now. I'm not going to leave you." With the little dog in his arms, Alex rushed to his car, determined to get the puppy the help it needed. But even as he drove away from the abandoned house, he couldn't shake the thought of what could have happened if he hadn't heard the puppy's cries. Alex drove as fast as he could, his eyes focused on the road, his mind racing with thoughts of the small puppy he had just rescued. The night was growing colder, and he could feel the weight of the puppy's fragile body in his arms. The little German shepherd was barely moving, except for the occasional soft whimper. As he turned onto the main road, Alex glanced down at the puppy. It was so small, so vulnerable, and so much weaker than he had expected. The poor thing's fur was matted and dirty, and there were signs of malnutrition. The puppy's ribs were visible under its fur, and Alex could feel how light it was. It made his heart ache. He reached into the back seat of the car and grabbed a soft blanket that he kept for emergencies. Carefully, he wrapped it around the puppy, trying to keep it warm. The puppy's breathing was shallow, and it seemed to be struggling just to stay awake. Alex's hands shook as he stroked the puppy's head, trying to comfort it. "You're going to be okay," Alex whispered softly. "I promise." The drive to the vet's office felt like it took forever. The streets were empty, and the soft hum of the car engine was the only sound in the night. Alex couldn't stop thinking about the puppy, about how it had been left all alone, tied up in that abandoned house. Who could do something so cruel to an innocent animal? Finally, they arrived at the animal clinic. Alex rushed inside, holding the puppy close. The receptionist, a kind woman named Lisa, immediately noticed the condition of the dog and led them into the back. "Don't worry," Lisa said gently as she took the puppy from Alex's arms. "We'll take good care of him." The vet, Dr. Harris, came in quickly. He was an older man with kind eyes, and he immediately began examining the puppy. Alex watched anxiously as Dr. Harris carefully checked the puppy's body, running his hands over the little dog's ribs and legs. "This little guy's in rough shape," Dr. Harris said softly. "He's severely malnourished and dehydrated. It looks like he hasn't eaten in days, maybe even longer. We'll need to run some tests to make sure there's no internal damage. But for now, we'll get him stabilized." Alex felt a lump form in his throat. He had known the puppy was in bad shape, but hearing it from the vet made it all feel so real. The poor puppy had been left to suffer alone, with no one to care for it. It was a miracle that Alex had heard its cries. Dr. Harris continued his examination, taking blood samples and checking the puppy's temperature. After a few minutes, he turned to Alex and gave a reassuring smile. "It's going to be a long road ahead, but I think he's going to make it. We just need to keep him hydrated and slowly get some food into him. He's a fighter." Alex felt a sense of relief wash over him, but it was mixed with sadness. The puppy had been through so much already. What kind of life had it led before this moment? How long had it been chained up in that lonely house? Alex couldn't shake the image of the puppy's eyes, the way it had looked at him, trusting him to rescue it. As the vet nurse prepared a small meal for the puppy, Alex sat down, his mind spinning with questions. The puppy had been abandoned, but how had it ended up in that house? Who had left it there? Was there anyone else who had seen what happened? Alex knew he needed to find answers, but for now, all that mattered was getting the puppy the help it needed. The nurse returned with a small bowl of food and water. Gently, Alex placed the puppy in his lap and watched as it slowly took a few tiny sips of water. It was a small step, but it was progress. "You're doing great," Alex whispered as he stroked the puppy's head. "We're going to make sure you're never alone again." As the hours passed, the puppy began to show small signs of improvement. It was still weak, but it was fighting. The worst was over, and Alex knew that, no matter what, he would do everything in his power to help this puppy heal. The next few days were filled with both hope and worry. Alex visited the vet's office every day, watching closely as the little puppy, Titan, as he had started calling him, slowly regained strength. Dr. Harris had explained that the puppy's condition was serious, but there was a good chance he would pull through. Still, Alex couldn't stop thinking about how close Titan had come to losing his chance at a better life. Titan's tiny body was fragile, but his spirit was strong. Every time Alex walked into the vet's office, the puppy would lift his head and wag his tail weakly. It was as though Titan knew he was safe now, but there was still a long road ahead. He wasn't out of danger yet. One evening, Alex received a call from Dr. Harris that changed everything. "Alex, it's about Titan," Dr. Harris said, his voice serious. "We've done all we can to stabilize him, but he's not responding well to food or water. I'm worried he might be suffering from internal damage. We need to run some more tests, but the situation is looking worse than we hoped." Alex's heart dropped. He had grown so attached to the little puppy, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. He knew he had to do whatever it took to help Titan, but now it seemed like time was running out. The following morning, Alex rushed to the vet's office. When he arrived, Titan was lying on the examination table, his body still and quiet. Dr. Harris and his team were busy running tests, but the fear in their eyes was hard to ignore. "Alex, we're doing everything we can," Dr. Harris said softly as he walked over to him. "Titan's body is just so weak, and we're not sure if he'll make it through this. We may have to make some difficult decisions soon." Alex felt a lump form in his throat. He looked down at the puppy, who seemed so small and fragile. How could this happen to him? He had already been through so much. It didn't seem fair. Alex had promised to protect him, to give him the life he deserved. And now it seemed like that promise might be broken. "I don't want to give up on him," Alex said, his voice tight with emotion. "Please, is there anything else we can do?" Dr. Harris hesitated for a moment before nodding. "There's one more option we can try. It's risky, but we can give Titan a special medication that might help stimulate his appetite and force his body to start accepting food. It's not guaranteed, but it could make a difference." Alex didn't hesitate. "Do it. I don't care about the risks. Just save him." With that, the team began administering the medication, carefully watching Titan's reactions. Alex sat nearby, his hands trembling as he watched the puppy's every movement. The minutes felt like hours. And then something incredible happened. Titan slowly lifted his head, his eyes blinking as if he was waking from a long sleep. His little tail wagged weakly, and he sniffed the air, searching for the food he had once been so desperate for. Alex's heart soared with relief. It wasn't much, but it was a sign. Titan was fighting. He wasn't ready to give up. Over the next few hours, Titan began to show more signs of improvement. He took a few sips of water, and later, a small amount of food. It was slow, but it was progress. Dr. Harris gave Alex a hopeful smile, but he was still cautious. "It's a good sign, Alex," he said, his voice filled with hope. "We'll keep monitoring him, but I think he's going to make it." Alex stayed with Titan all day, refusing to leave his side. He knew there were still risks, and there was a long way to go before Titan would be fully healthy again. But for the first time, Alex allowed himself to believe that this little puppy might just have a chance at a happy life. As the day turned to evening, Alex sat by Titan's side, gently stroking his head. The puppy looked up at him with tired eyes. But there was something different now. The fear in his eyes had faded, replaced with a quiet trust. "You're going to be okay," Alex whispered, his voice full of emotion. "I'm here, and I'm never going to leave you." Over the next few weeks, Titan's health continued to improve, but there were still moments when Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The little puppy had been through so much already, and though his body was growing stronger, there were still signs of fear in his eyes. Titan had trouble trusting people, especially when they moved too quickly or raised their hands. He would flinch at sudden noises and hide behind Alex when anything scared him. It was heartbreaking to see such a sweet dog so frightened. Alex knew that Titan's physical wounds would heal, but the emotional scars would take time. He spent hours sitting by Titan's side, helping him feel safe and showing him that not everyone would hurt him. But as Alex continued to care for Titan, a question kept nagging at him. How had the puppy ended up abandoned and chained up in that house? Someone had to be responsible for Titan's suffering, and Alex felt a deep need to uncover the truth. He wasn't just going to let this slip away. One evening, after Titan had settled into his new bed, Alex decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. He had already asked around the local area, but no one seemed to know much about the abandoned house or the puppy. It was as if Titan had been forgotten by everyone except for Alex. As he walked past the house, Alex noticed something strange. There was a man standing in front of the old fence, staring at the house with a sad expression on his face. He looked like he was lost in thought, as if remembering something painful. Curious, Alex approached the man cautiously. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Do you know anything about the house here? There's a puppy that was abandoned in there. I rescued him." The man's eyes widened in surprise, and then he seemed to relax. "I remember that dog," he said quietly. "There used to be a guy who lived in that house. He was a breeder, or at least he called himself one." Alex frowned. "A breeder? You mean someone who sells dogs?" The man nodded. "Yeah, that's right. He would sell dogs to anyone who wanted them, but he didn't care much about how they lived. He only cared about the money. I heard he had a lot of dogs there, but one by one, they all disappeared. Some people said he was neglecting them. Then one day, he just vanished. No one's heard from him since. The house has been empty ever since." Alex's heart sank. This explains so much. Titan's condition wasn't just the result of neglect. It was the result of someone using him and other dogs as nothing more than money-making tools. The man had treated them like objects, not living creatures. Alex couldn't believe someone would be so cruel to innocent animals. "Did anyone ever report him?" Alex asked, his voice trembling with anger. The man shook his head. "I don't think anyone knew what was really going on. People just assumed he was a bad breeder, but no one realized how bad it was until he left. By then, it was too late for the ones who were left behind." Alex felt a surge of anger and frustration. How could someone do this to so many animals? But even more than that, he felt a deep sense of responsibility. He had found Titan, and he wasn't going to let the story end here. "I'm going to make sure he's held accountable for what he did," Alex said firmly. "No dog should ever go through what Titan went through." The man looked at Alex, his expression softening. "I hope you do. That poor pup. He's lucky you found him." Alex nodded, his mind racing with thoughts of what he needed to do next. He knew that the authorities needed to know about this, but he also needed to make sure that Titan and any other dogs who might still be out there were safe. He wasn't going to let anyone forget the pain these animals had suffered. As he walked back home, Titan at his side, Alex felt a new sense of determination. He would do whatever it took to ensure that no dog would ever face the same fate again. For Titan, and for every animal that had been abandoned, Alex would fight to make sure their voices were heard. The next morning, Alex woke up early, his mind already filled with plans. After his conversation with the man in front of the abandoned house, he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do more. Titan's story was just the tip of the iceberg. There had to be other dogs out there who had suffered the same fate, and Alex couldn't rest until he did something about it. He spent the day gathering information. First, he contacted local animal shelters and rescue groups to see if anyone had heard of the breeder or knew more about what had happened. Then he spoke with the local authorities, sharing everything he had learned from the man who had spoken to him the night before. He even asked if anyone had filed complaints about the breeder before he disappeared. It wasn't easy. Many people seemed unaware of what had happened, and some even dismissed the idea that there was any reason to investigate further. But Alex didn't give up. He had Titan's story, and that was enough to keep him moving forward. Later that afternoon, Alex received a call from a local animal control officer named Sarah. She had been investigating abandoned animals in the area and had heard about Titan's rescue. She was interested in working together to find out more about the breeder and any other animals that might need help. "We've seen cases like this before," Sarah explained over the phone. "There's a chance we might be able to track down some of his old clients and figure out where the dogs went. If there are other animals out there, we need to get them out of those conditions." Alex felt a sense of relief wash over him. Finally, he wasn't alone in this fight. Sarah was experienced, and together, they could make a real difference. They agreed to meet up the next day and begin searching for answers. That night, Alex couldn't help but think about Titan. The little puppy had been through so much already, but he was doing better now. Titan was healthy, playful, and trusting once more. It was as if the puppy knew things were changing for the better. The small tail wags and happy barks were a sign that, despite everything, Titan had found a way to move forward. But Alex knew there was still much more work to do. He had to make sure that no other dog went through the same suffering. He wasn't going to let this cruel breeder get away with what he had done. The next morning, Alex and Sarah set out on their mission. They started by visiting the local shelters to ask if any of the dogs rescued from similar situations were connected to the breeder. The staff at the shelters confirmed that they had received several animals over the years from people who had bought dogs from him, only to find out the animals were sick or neglected. It was clear that the breeder had been running a business based on exploitation, caring only about profits and not the well-being of the animals. Alex felt a deep anger rise inside him, but he kept his focus. There were still leads to follow. As the day went on, they spoke to more people who had known the breeder. One woman revealed that she had once bought a dog from him, but the animal had been so sick it died just a few weeks later. The woman had tried to report the breeder, but she was told there was nothing that could be done. People knew what was going on, Sarah said, shaking her head, but no one did enough to stop it. Alex felt a deep sense of frustration. How could so many people have known about this, and yet nothing had been done? But he was determined to change that. He promised Titan, and every other dog, that he wouldn't let it go unpunished. As they continued their search, they began to gather enough evidence to bring the case to the authorities. Sarah suggested they try to get a search warrant for the abandoned house. There was a chance they could find more clues or even discover more animals that had been left behind. That evening, Alex sat with Titan, his heart full of hope. He had already rescued one life, and now he was fighting to make sure that other animals would never have to suffer like Titan had. It was a long road ahead, but with the support of people like Sarah, Alex knew they could make a real difference. "Don't worry, buddy," Alex whispered as he petted Titan's soft fur. "I'm not going to stop until we've made sure this never happens again." The following days were filled with determination and hard work. Alex and Sarah had gathered all the information they could find about the breeder, and it was clear that they were getting closer to bringing him to justice. They had enough evidence to convince the authorities that something needed to be done. It wasn't just about Titan anymore. It was about all the animals that had suffered at the hands of this cruel man. One morning, Alex received a call from Sarah. She sounded excited, and Alex's heart skipped a beat. "We've got it," Sarah said, her voice full of energy. "I've just heard from Animal Control. We got a search warrant for the house. The authorities are going in today, and they're going to investigate." Alex could hardly believe it. They were finally going to get answers. His heart raced as he grabbed his keys and headed out the door to meet Sarah at the scene. When he arrived at the abandoned house, the area was buzzing with activity. Police cars were parked along the street, and officers were preparing to enter the property. Sarah greeted Alex with a smile, but he could see the nervousness in her eyes. "We've got to be careful," she said, guiding him toward the house. "We don't know what we'll find in there. There could be more animals, or worse." Alex nodded, his stomach tightening. He had seen enough suffering already, and he wasn't sure what to expect. The idea of finding more animals locked away, forgotten and neglected, was almost too much to bear. As they entered the house, the smell hit them first, a strong, sour odor that made Alex gag. The house was in terrible condition. Dust and debris covered the floors, and broken furniture was scattered around. But what struck Alex the most was the silence. There was no sound of barking dogs, no whimpering or scratching at the door. The place felt empty, abandoned, just like the animals that had been left behind. Officers searched the house room by room, carefully inspecting every corner. It didn't take long before they found something. A small, dirty cage in the back room, abandoned and empty. It seemed like a cruel reminder of what had happened here. Alex's stomach twisted, but he didn't look away. This was a part of the story that needed to be uncovered. After a thorough search, they discovered a few more signs of the breeder's neglect. Old papers, receipts for dog sales, and photographs of dogs in poor conditions were found scattered around. There was no sign of the breeder himself, but it was clear that he had been running a business of suffering, selling sick dogs to people who didn't know any better. "This is it," Sarah said softly, looking over the evidence. "This is the proof we need. We're going to make sure he's held accountable." Alex felt a mix of anger and relief. The search had uncovered the truth, and now it was time to make sure the man who had caused so much pain was stopped. But even as he looked around the empty house, his thoughts kept returning to Titan. The little puppy had been through so much, and yet he was here today, healthy and happy, thanks to Alex's love and care. "Where is Titan?" Sarah asked, noticing Alex's distracted expression. "He's at home, waiting for me." Alex replied with a soft smile. "I promised him that we'd get through this together." As the officers finished their search and began gathering the evidence, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. The house that had once been a place of cruelty was now a symbol of change. The evidence they found would help stop the breeder from harming any more animals, and it was a step toward ensuring that no one would ever be able to treat animals that way again. Later that evening, after the search was over, Alex returned home. Titan was waiting for him at the door, wagging his tail and barking excitedly. The puppy had no idea what had happened, but he could feel that things were different. His new life had begun, and Alex was determined to make it a good one. Sitting down on the couch, Alex pulled Titan close and hugged him gently. "We did it, buddy," he whispered. "We stopped him." Titan licked Alex's face, his tail wagging even faster. It was clear that the bond between them was stronger than ever. Titan had found his forever home, and Alex had found something even more important: peace. The fight wasn't over yet, but with Titan by his side, Alex knew they could face anything together. The days following the search were filled with progress. Alex and Sarah had done everything they could to ensure the breeder was brought to justice. The authorities were now actively looking for him, and a public investigation was underway. The whole community had started to take notice of the case, and people were finally waking up to the truth about animal cruelty. While the authorities worked on tracking down the breeder, Alex focused on Titan. He had promised the puppy a better life, and every day they grew closer. Titan was no longer the scared, sickly little dog Alex had found in that abandoned house. He was playful, energetic, and happy, exactly what a puppy should be. One afternoon, Alex took Titan to the park for the first time. He had been hesitant at first, not knowing how Titan would react to the new environment. But Titan seemed excited from the moment they arrived. He sniffed the grass, ran in circles, and chased after the tennis ball Alex threw. Watching Titan run freely, his tail wagging with joy, filled Alex's heart with warmth. He's really come along. Weeks passed, and the town began to heal. The story of Titan's rescue had touched many hearts. People from all around the area reached out to Alex, offering support, donations, and even sharing their own stories of rescuing animals. The local shelters saw a rise in adoptions, and more people started to realize the importance of treating animals with kindness and respect. Alex's life had changed completely. He had not only rescued a puppy, but had also become an active voice in the fight against animal cruelty. With Titan by his side, Alex spoke at schools, animal shelters, and community events, encouraging others to consider adoption and to help animals in need. His blog, which he had started to share his experiences, had gained a lot of attention, and many people were inspired by his story. One Saturday, as Alex